Welcome to the Creative Life Podcast. My name is Caroline and I am your host. Today on the podcast, we have one of my very, very dear old friends, Adrienne Asterita. And I wanted to bring Adrienne on today because in many ways, Adrienne's story is similar to mine. We met each other in our early 20s in New York City, where we were both pursuing what we hoped to be a theater career. Acting, singing, auditioning. And then we both wound our way and found ourselves in education. Now, Adrienne's story becomes particularly interesting as of late because she is now experiencing, and I hope you'll forgive this pun, but since we're talking about theater, I think it's appropriate. She's now experiencing a fantastic second act in the theater after a slapdash COVID motivated move from New York out west to Colorado. She has rebooted her career in the theater. And it's really exciting and inspiring. And I have to say, it makes me a little bit jealous as well. And so I wanted to have Adrienne on so that she could tell us her story and share with us what she's learned pursuing a career in the theater. So here she is, Adrienne Asterita. Adrienne Asterita is with us today. Adrienne, thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know you've got one of the busiest schedules of anybody that I know, so I appreciate you taking this time to talk with me about these things. And
wow, really? Okay.
well, you're very busy. You're very busy. Every time I'm talking to you, you're so busy. But would you tell me? How would you define what your job is? Now, how would you describe yourself? Like if someone at the bar is like, what do you do? What would you say?
What do I not do? I think might be a shorter answer. Well, I'm a mom. That's probably first. I have 3 kids, so that keeps me extremely busy. I take care of the house mainly. I'm married and my partner, my husband, works a full-time job. So I do a little more of the house stuff and the arranging and mental load and all of that jazz.
Life stuff.
Yeah, but he does a lot. He does a lot of the cooking, which I appreciate because I don't love to cook. I'm a preparer. I'm a food preparer. Not so much. That's how we've distinguished that. So like breakfast, lunch, simple stuff. And he does most of the dinners. And then I do a lot of freelance work. I call myself a teaching artist, which means I'm a performer, but I also teach performing arts. So I kind of teach what I do essentially. So I act, I sing, I do voiceover work, I do theater mostly, I do some on-camera work, and I teach. So I teach mostly kids. I teach mostly acting, musical theater is kind of my forefront. So I mostly teach that. I do some vocal performance work. I do a lot of audition coaching. I work with adults too, but mostly just friends for fun and free. But I'd like to branch out into that more because I've just been working for kids for so long. It's kind of where I've always land. I also, on occasion, I substitute teach in the district where I live because, got to make that money. And I've done that for many years and I am doing it again here. And then what else do I do? I do some other freelance voiceover work that I can't disclose because I signed an NDA.
Of course. No, not at all. And you're directing a show right now, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. And I do that. I direct.
Oh, yeah, that.
I direct. It's just been a long time since I've directed because of COVID. So I keep forgetting. Yeah, I do that. I stage manage sometimes and I act and perform as well, and theater mostly.
But most of your creative activities now are in the theater stage world, you would say.
Yeah, that's true. That is accurate. Yeah.
How did you get to this point? Like what was your path to becoming this?
Oh boy. This is like the weirdest path. I don't know. I'm from New York. I thought I would live there forever because everyone's, moving to New York and here I was already there. I grew up in Queens, Long Island, just pretty much being like in the city kind of. Went to school, NYU, Manhattan. Then eventually I moved back to Queens and, worked my million jobs because that's what you do in New York. I think at one point I had like 7 different jobs. Like it was too many. I know. And I tell people that and they're like, how did you do that? I'm like, I don't know. I was never home really. I was always, I
Was
ate out all the time.
and you were acting during this time, right? I mean, you were
Um, I was
also
trying
trying
to.
to do that kind of stuff, yeah,
Yeah, I
around your
was doing
job.
the New York actor life auditioning. I would say I was auditioning more than probably anything else, but I was substitute teaching. I was working in an after school program with kids. I did concession stands at theaters, and then did a bunch of work at nightclubs like concert venues in New
Mhm.
York eventually. And so I did co-tech, I did waitressing, I did production work, hospitality, I did bartending, which wound up being the best money. So I stayed with that for a long time. I worked at a couple different venues. I did babysitting. I worked for an agency, actually. I sang with a children's music group for a long time, like 8 to 10 years. I sang with them, and we would do gigs around the tri-state area. So that was fun. And I got paid to do that, which is great. I did some recording stuff here and there, some demo work, singing. I mean, I did
Yeah.
children's music classes like for babies, like singing, mommy and me type classes, caregiver and me, I should say. I know I'm missing something. I'm sure of it, but
Well, you did a lot of teaching and directing as
yeah,
well,
yeah.
right?
I think what wound up happening is, so at NYU, I went to the drama school and I went to Tisch School of the Arts. I went to the Playwrights Horizons Theater School within Tisch. They have these things called studios there, and they all have different focuses. Some of them are just acting. They have a tech one, and then playwrights was kind of a combo platter, if you will. So it was like you went there if you didn't just want to do acting, you had other interests. And I had directed a show in high school, and so when I went for my audition at NYU, I actually auditioned for their musical theater program, which at the time was Cap 21, which has since become its own entity that you can go to separately. I don't know if they still have a musical theater one associated with NYU, but that's another story. And I sang in my audition and I did my thing. And the guy was like, that was great, but I see you've directed on your resume. And then he just started to sell me on playwrights. I think it wasn't as well known as some of the other studios because you've got like Stella Adler and Lee Strasberg and Meisner and the experimental theater wing. People knew those more. And I was like, oh, I didn't know what that was. So he explained it to me and I was like, actually, that sounds right up my alley because you could do acting, you could do directing. I learned about stage managing. I learned about lighting, costumes, sets, props. I had to stage manage and run crew for shows for the older directing students show. It was just like a huge, well-rounded theatrical like education that I didn't know I could get. And I was just thrilled to be placed there because it was like, if he didn't suggest that, I definitely would have gone, I think, probably in the wrong direction
Ah,
because it was mostly dancing in the musical theater programs, and I danced, it was fine, but I had knee injuries. I had dislocated my knees a bunch of times, and I was getting to the point where I had one more dislocation in college, and they were like, you got to stop, and I was like, well, I'm not dancing anymore now. But if I had continued to, it probably would have happened and then really been a big setback. Like, what would I have done? And I'm like, maybe I would have just switched to playwrights anyway, maybe that's what would have happened. But it just landed me in a place that I needed to be, but I didn't know I needed to be there. And in that education, because we were learning every aspect of theater, we even had like a theater management course that we took. And we had, I don't know if you ever heard of the Here Theater. It's like,
yeah.
yeah. So a bunch of the graduates from my program started the Here Theater in New York. So they came in and did a workshop with us in our theater management course to explain to us what it was like to like start your own theater company. And it was like, who else is getting this information,
That's so smart. That's so
Right.
smart.
Especially at the time in the 90s. This is like before, social media and whatnot. You couldn't just look it up and Google something and find out information. You had to like know who to talk to. So that was, I felt, just kind of the beginning of this wild path that I got on because it opened my mind to things I hadn't even thought of. And I was like, oh, actually, I do love doing that. And they tell you, I don't know if they still do this, but they, as in like the industry, if you could do anything other than acting, you should do it. Like you're not committed enough. And so I always had this fear that if I did something else, um, I was never going to make it as an actor because I wasn't committed enough. But I couldn't help it. I was intrigued. And even I took a musical theater class, I think it was my sophomore year, I did like a directing, acting, like co-major within the studio. So it wasn't considered like an actual co-major, but that's what I was doing. And he was like, we didn't have midterms because it's, acting. They just like assessed your progress. And in my midterm with my musical theater teacher, he was like, you should really look into teaching. And here I am like, 19, right? Or 18, whatever it was, 19. And he's like, you should look into teaching. And I got so mad at him. I was like, what are you trying to say? I'm not good. I'm not good at acting and I'm not a good singer. And he's like, no. You're great. You're amazing. You're one of the best singers in the class, actually. But you have something special. He's like, when you are watching these people perform in this class, I want to watch you because you're so engaged and I can tell that you're following the story. And I know I can call on you for feedback because he would have us give feedback to teach us how to do that. And that's how I learned, it was like the basis for everything I do now as a teacher. And he was like, Adrienne, because he knew I was engaged and that I was going to give something helpful and useful and productive. And he was like, you don't understand, you have a gift. And I was like, just too young and stupid to absorb that in a positive way. I was just like, he thinks I'm no good, that was my take.
When we're young, it's hard to think about all these other paths and the fact that you might be doing more than one thing. Also,
or something other than the dream, you have this dream of Broadway, and I'm going to be
get out of school and you'll go to an audition and you'll get a Broadway show. What happens in a Broadway show. That's
right. It's like, I'm going to get a Broadway show. And I had this timeline by this age, by this time, literally none of that happened and it's fine. But at the time I was like, how dare you? And I got so offended. But of course, eventually one of the things, and that studio tried to prepare us for the real world in the sense of make sure you have other passions. That was one of the few, I felt, studios and teachers that were telling us that. Make sure you have passions other than just this one narrow path, because that's not what the world is like. When you get out of this program, you're going to have to make money. You're going to have to figure out how to do all of this. And if you're just an actor, that's not going to work. I mean, it's going to work for 2% of people. So what do the other 98% of us do?
Well, even for the people that it works for, and I'm saying that in quotes, there's a lot of waiting around in between when it works.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you might even book a bunch of jobs and there's still a lot of waiting around and time to fill.
That is very accurate. I've known people who've been on Broadway and started their own businesses, but would do Broadway shows all the time, but had to have that because there's sort of an unknown to it. Even though you'll get another show, most likely, it's not a given. And at some point,
you don't know when that will be.
Right, you don't know when.
Be unemployed for a year or 5 years.
Right, how long is it going to run? And especially if you're a dancer, there's a shelf life to that. At some point, you can't be doing that stuff. I see that a lot with dancers who are like, yep, I'm done. And I've worked with a lot of teaching artists who are former Broadway dancers because of that. Exactly. She was like, I've 2 or 3 I can think of who were like, yeah, I just ran out of steam. I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And they were working constantly. But yeah, it's not a forever thing. It's not like you get into a company and you're there for 10 years, and that's not really how that works. So I remember I had a great teacher, came in, and they weren't famous yet. You probably know her. Her name is Cameron Mannheim.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. She taught a random improv class. They were trying it out with our year for the first time to see how it went over. And of course we were like, we love her. She's amazing. So she came in, she's a working actor in New York City. She rode a motorcycle. She was the coolest. And she made us do this improv class. And I was never more scared of anything in my life. And I completely refused to participate. And I hid in the corner, which you know me pretty well. That's not usually my way. I'm usually get me in there. But at the time, I had never done that before, and she was just intimidating. Not that she did anything to be intimidating. She was just one of the most confident, larger-than-life humans that I'd ever met. And she, like, I just was like, whoa, she was
Yeah.
so incredible. And I just felt like I didn't belong in the room with her or something like that. And she talked about, first of all, she talked about how she did a million things. She was like a massage therapist, I think. And that was how she got her first soap opera job, because they wanted someone who could be a massage therapist and she actually knew how to do it. And so it got her the gig. And she was like, you have to work in the real world to know how to play real people.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
you can't just be an actor living that life. That's not real life. Like,
Yeah.
how many people are doing that? How do you know how to be these people you're portraying if you don't know how they live in the world and you've never experienced those things? And that was probably like those two things, that my musical theater teacher and her, were this like two most important things that take away in my education, like that stick with me, of like, yeah, you're portraying people in theater, in film, in whatever. You got to know what that's like. You can't just be audition, 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 book a gig. You
Mhm.
know, you can't just live like that. So she forced me to get up, and I'll never forget it. She made me sing. She's like, you're going to be like, you know, it's like Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra style. And here's your backup singers, and go. And I was like, what? And I made up a song on the spot, which, as you know, is something I'm very good at now. But at the time, I'd never done that before. And she was like thrilled and kind of mad at me at the same time, because she was like, why have you been hiding? How dare you? You know? And I was like, because I'm going to vomit right now. But it was the most exhilarating experience of my life. Like, I can put myself in that moment. I can see it. And I'm like, you know, it's like a core memory. It's like, oh my God, this was life changing, because she got me to trust myself and believe in myself in a way I had never done before. And she made me feel like I mattered, even though I, you know, didn't feel like I had a place yet in the world. And she also validated this idea of, you don't have to just be an actor. Like, there's this other life. And that other musical theater teacher of mine, who sadly passed away, his name was David Bucknam. He used to say to me all the time, it's really good that you have a life outside of this place. It's really important that you do that. And I can see you're one of the people who's doing that. Don't forget about that. Make sure you have other things in your life that bring you joy. And he, sadly, he passed away shortly after he said that to me. It was right before I graduated. That's another story, but it just stuck with me, because it was like, you're hearing the industry telling you one thing. If you have any other interest, you're not committed enough. And then you have these teachers saying, no, don't listen to that. And they were the first people that contradicted that narrative that was being sold to us all. And I'm so grateful, because I don't know what would have happened if I didn't have that sort of like, but maybe, you know. It's like when I got out of school and I was like thrown into the audition world, and I think I did like a terrible children's, like, it's called TYA, Theater for Young Audience tour, that I won't say the name of the company, but lordy Lord. It was like page of nothing, and it was just a hot mess. And I thought, this cannot be what I'm doing with my life.
This can't be what the thing is, right? This isn't the thing. No.
This isn't the thing, you know? And I thought, well, I know I have to do this kind of stuff to make my way, but I just felt, no, I can't. This can't be the goal on any level. Like, there was nothing about it that was really that enjoyable. I mean, it was fun to meet the kids, and we're in costumes and all of that, but like the touring and the money, oh Lord, no. And so pretty early on, I started to realize I needed to figure out this other love. And I think I got like a job working at a camp for a summer. And I realized I was really good with kids. I don't exactly remember like the first time. So I just had a good relationship with kids. I think because I refused to kind of grow up in a way. I see myself, like, I still see the kid in me, and I still identify with it. And I think a lot of adults, I shouldn't generalize, but I think a good amount of adults don't. And so that's something that I bring to the table, where I'm just like right with them, like, yeah, let's do that. Plus, being an actor and now being more comfortable with improv. I mean, what's more improvisation than working with kids? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just
True.
all day. It's like constant. So I was kind of floundering. I didn't know what I was doing. I was living back at home in Long Island, and my roommate from college, AJ, she had gotten a job at a school in Manhattan working in their after school program. And she was like, they need people. Go interview. And I interviewed, and the woman immediately was like, well, you're pretty much hired because AJ, so you got the job pretty much. And that was kind of the beginning of this whole new journey, because I started working with kids like on a regular basis, and it was like a real job. And there was pride in that job. And it was, I think, the first time, I had a bunch of like, I worked in fast food, I worked in retail and, in college and that kind of stuff in high school. But this was like the first job that I was like, oh yeah, like I have something to provide, to offer. And I worked my way up in there, and I worked in the office there, and then I worked in their summer camp program. And then eventually I started working with their musical theater camp program. And then at some point I was offered the opportunity to take it over as the director, which scared me to death. And I was just like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know what. And I remember just taking that moment of like, well, I guess you're not going to know unless you try, because I wanted to do it. And that was information. That was like years into me living in the city at this point. I had moved into the city, working all these different jobs and concessions and this and that and babysitting. And this was like an opportunity to do something that I could really sink my teeth into and really like put my name on it and feel pride. And it was in the world of my world, musical theater, like what, and I did that, I want to say like almost 10 years. And, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. It was amazing. And after doing that, I discovered the word teaching artist. I don't remember when someone said that to me, because I never called myself that all those years. I just said, oh yeah, I'm the director of this camp. But I didn't know that was like a job.
Yeah. Well, for the listeners out there, it's a lovely job. I've been a teaching artist too. It's like, it is exactly what it sounds like, but it's different than being, say, like the full-time theater teacher or the full-time music teacher, because what you really are doing, it tends to be kind of project-based, or like you're coming in for a short time for a special thing or short bursts. So you get to really focus on something. And I think in your case, it fits perfectly because you were doing these musical intensive kind of things, right? You'd have them kids all day and for 2 weeks and crank out a show. I mean, there's nothing more.
Oh my God. It was exhilarating and exhausting. And I would do it all over again in a hot minute. It's one of those things. And that's something that comes with age, is you discover like all those things that felt so hard and impossible were the best things in your life.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, that was so creative too. I mean, it allowed you to use all those skills that you had.
Yeah. I remember saying to my mom at some point, hey, I'm using my degree. I'm actually using my degree, because I didn't just get a degree as an actor and a performer. I got a degree as a director. Like that was something I studied, and I studied stage managing and all the design and all the things. And there I was putting it all to use. And there was a particular point where, well, I moved out of the city at some point. I got married, and my husband is from Colorado, and he did not plan on staying in New York City forever. And kind of, I would say he blindsided me a little bit with that information.
I was going to say, didn't you get a little tricked there? You got a little.
I don't want to say tricked, but he was like, we were looking for a place. Like we wanted to get a bigger place in Queens after we got married. And because we were living in a little studio apartment, it was exactly 422 square feet.
Oh man.
He didn't want to be in New York City. We get married. We're living in this shoebox. We're looking for a bigger apartment. And he's like, well, we want to have kids, right? Yeah, we have kids. I don't want to raise kids in the city. I need a backyard. Like I need grass and trees. And I was like, there's trees here, And he's like, I'm from Colorado. This is not exactly the plan. So my brother had moved to New Jersey with his kids. My mom was still out in Long Island, but she was 1 foot into Florida, which she has now since moved to, since retiring. So I was like, well, we might as well look in New Jersey. And so that's what we did. We bought a house, first time homeowners. We got a house in New Jersey. I continued commuting to the city for work in the summer and bartending because I was making so much money. And my husband worked in Times Square at his job, which he still works at remotely now. And so he took the bus in. We were in like in a commuter town. And I did that until I was pregnant with my first kid. And actually, what I did, this is so funny. So, right before I moved to New Jersey, I sent an email to the Paper Mill Playhouse, which is this prominent regional theater in New Jersey, to the artistic director. Like, who am I? And I just was like, hi, I'm a teaching artist. Because at this point, I had learned this term somehow. And I
You
was
had it
like,
ready. You had it ready to go.
I was like, let's go. I was so It's amazing. So I just sent it to him and I was like, I'm moving to New Jersey. I'm a teaching artist. I'm interested in working with you. I was only going to be like 15 minutes away from the theater. He wrote me back like the next day. I couldn't
Oh,
believe it. To this day, I'm still surprised by that. So it's like, it can't hurt. It can't hurt. And he's like, oh, that's so wonderful. It'll be so great to have you. I'm going to forward this to, her name was Mickey. She was the, like the director of the education department. She unfortunately has passed away since then, but he sent me to her. And then she, I think, contacted me like the day after that. It was really fast.
wow.
And then was like, we'd love to meet you, blah, blah, blah. And I went in for an interview and she was like, you're hired, like on the spot. And that was just wild. I think I initially did like their shorter program in the spring. They do like a shorter program just to see how it would go. And she came and like watched like a couple of my classes and then like watched my final performance day. And I swear this woman was like moved to tears. She like hugged me. She's like, I'm so happy you're here. We're so happy to have you. I was like, what? I hadn't done anything outside of that one school I worked at. So I didn't know like what that looked like as a freelance artist, teaching artist.
Interesting. So you'd been doing teaching a long, long
Right.
time, but only really at one place, right? So it does
Pretty
sort of,
much.
and
Yeah.
that place gives a lot of creative leeway. So I can imagine you were
Yes.
very comfortable, like you were like really like you had your own thing going on there.
Yeah. And now I
Good
came
for
into,
them.
and I will
Yeah.
say Paper Mill they have things organized differently. It's not like more or less, it's just different. They do sort of are like, here's the structure, here's the expectation of the class, but make it your own. And I will say in general, I've worked at many places now since then. That's pretty much the standard. It's
Mhm.
pretty much, there's trust. You're hired. We trust you. Here's the description of the class. Make it work. And then I also got a job at NJ Pack, which actually was someone that I worked with at the school in New York, was working at NJ Pack. And so she kind of like pushed me up the ladder to get an interview, that was actually kind of scary because it was probably the first time I had to go through all of these stages of writing out my lesson plans and sort of providing, what do you call it, pedagogy for what I do. And I was like,
What do
first
you
of all,
call it?
I was like, first of all, what is that word? What is this? Pegasus? What? Like the first time I heard it, I was like, is this another language? Like I had never heard that before. It was great, but it was scary because I'd never done anything in that way before. And it was just very different. It felt like a real, like, corporate kind of job. It wasn't at all, but it had that feeling in my brain because, well, oh, I have to
Yeah.
submit lesson plans to you and they had to have a certain outline and then there was like I had to take a lot of workshops and I had to do a lot of training with them, which I'd never done before, which was amazing because first of all, I got paid for the training. So like, yeah, hello, sign me up. But secondly, like I learned so much. And again, I still use a lot of what I learned in those trainings.
Were you
One,
were you performing at all during this time when you
oh, that's a
like
great question.
between when you all moved to New Jersey and you were doing all this stuff?
Um, as an actor, I think at that point, not really. Yeah, I'd done a bunch of the like off Broadway stuff in New York. I never really hit anywhere. I did a bunch of like summer stock, I never really got anywhere with it. And then when I was pregnant with my daughter in New Jersey, I was doing tons and tons of background extra work in New York because they would pay you extra to bring your car and being pregnant, they would always want pregnant people around. So I made a lot of money doing that. Yeah, I did that for years in New York. Forget about all these things because it's just a way to make money, you
Yeah,
know?
you still had your hand in. I mean, you were doing
Yeah,
maybe doing auditions
yeah.
in there, but like,
I stopped auditioning when I moved to New Jersey. It
oh,
was
you
just
did.
too much.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the children's group that I worked with did a musical, and I did a workshop of that at the Fringe, and then they did two more stagings of it like years later. So I did do that because that was just something I continued because of I had worked with them for so many years, so I was already involved. Oh, I was singing in bands. Right, that's right. Okay. Even I forget what I've done. Well,
Whole
about
chunks of
right,
time just
right.
gone.
Oh yeah, I did that. About 3 months after my daughter was born, I answered an ad for a country band. I don't know what I was thinking. I just was like, I need to do something. I can't sit still, and I was getting bored, I think. And I'm like, it's at night. This is perfect. I didn't want to go back to bartending. I just didn't want to do that. And they hired me like on the spot. And then one of the guys in that band was in another band whose singer left like 2 or 3 months later. And they were like, do you want to sing with us too? So within 3 months, I was singing in two bands in New Jersey and I was doing a couple of gigs a month.
Nice.
Yeah. And it wasn't like amazing money or anything, but it was so much fun. And it's something I'd never done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was scared at first, but after a while, you know how things go. I was like, oh, in the beginning, just like that improv class. And then it became kind of boring after a while. Like if I sing "Hit Me with My Best Shot," whatever that, one more time. Oh my
You know
gosh,
the song. You know you want to sing it right now. You know.
no, please no more. I think I get a little PTSD every time I hear Joan Jett. No shade, Joan Jett, you're amazing. I love her, but it ruins it for you when you have to sing it
Over
over
and over.
and over again.
No, imagine how they feel. Well,
Right? Oh my gosh.
tell me a little bit about what it's like working with kids and you're trying to in a creative medium and you're trying to express to them how to harness their creativity or
Boy.
what do you see in the kids that you work with? Are there some that sort of naturally come to it
Yeah.
just and it comes to them easily? Are there others that have to really work at it or what do you notice?
Yeah, I definitely see that there's a spectrum. I think everything in life has a spectrum. And I think, and the age is going to matter, but there are certainly kids who come in and no matter what their age is, are just like, boom, because they respond to your direction. And I think, pat myself on the back, I think that makes me a good director because I can change my wording and change like how I explain something to get something out of a child, depending on how I see that they are comprehending it. So it's kind of like when you teach a kid math or something, and now the way they teach math, there's like 7 different ways to do one problem. It's very similar to that. Like, oh, okay, when I say it this way, this kid is not getting it. But when I say it that way, they come alive. So often I will try out different strategies to like get somewhere with them. And I
Well,
don't want to say
if you're talking pedagogy,
is that what
then
that is?
you're describing
Really?
delivering feedback and responsive teaching.
Oh my God.
Then
I'm writing
you
that down.
doing pedagogy.
I'm like the blue collar version of whatever that is. I don't know the words. I just know how to do it.
But that's what it is. I mean, like you're right. It's like it is the looking at what's in front of you and saying, okay, how can I explain this in a way to help this
Yeah.
student, this child, this adult, whoever it is, change their behavior into what it is I'd like them to be doing or what it is they'd like to be doing or
Right. Or just in the right direction. I think something I've learned, because I think when I first started out directing, especially, I was like, no, it has to be this way. Like I had this, like there was like a goal, an end goal, and we all have to get here. And I've definitely learned to shed that need a lot because what I've learned now, especially as an actor, as a director, as an educator, it's a collaboration. And this is my favorite thing that I've learned that I think is important for people to take away. You're not just doing it alone, and you can have a goal, sort of, but you have to be flexible about exactly where it's going to land because you're including other people in that process. And they're going to bring in their perspective, and they're going to bring in their cultural and, their backgrounds and whatever experiences in life and all these things that you cannot understand or relate to necessarily in the same way. And so you have to be open to letting it guide you in wherever it goes. So now when I teach, and actually I did a great program with NJPAC, it was actually through Disney, called Disney Musical in Schools. One of my favorite programs I've ever worked for. And it's a national program. They even do some things overseas. Highly recommend any teaching artists look for work with them because it was incredible. They do tons of training. And one of the things they talk about is like, it's, yes, you should have a plan and it's mapped out, but part of the plan should be getting the kids involved in the decision making. So to this day, I go into my rehearsal process and I go, okay, this just happened last night, actually, in the musical I'm directing. I'm directing Sister Act. And I was like, the nuns have to put their hands up and do this thing. And I'm not really a great choreographer, but Disney Musicals in Schools taught me how to be a choreographer, sort of, and then teach others. So I can do it when I need to. And so I'm like, okay, I want them to do this with the hands, but I don't know. What do y'all think? Should we do our hands like open jazz hands? Should we do spirit fingers? Should we do straight hands? Whatever. And then I let them decide. So the goal was hands are up, right? But I let them decide like how that happened and how the detail of that was created. And it was great because it gives them an investment. There's more of a buy-in. And that was something they would always talk about. They have to have a buy-in. There's got to be a buy-in. So, okay, we need to get from here to here. I don't know. Does it make sense for you to run, jump, walk? How are we going to get there? I mean, that's a generalization, but I include that in the way I teach all the time.
A lot of arts teachers have spoken about this with me, and I've read about this as well, is that this idea of if you give someone total creative free reign, and it's particularly children, they often don't know what to do with that. But if you give them a creative challenge within a parameter, it's much, much easier for them to rise to the occasion and be creative. I find that even for myself, if I'm starting some creative project and I have to have some sort of like starting place, right? It's like, I'm at least going to look at this score, or I'm going to whatever that kind of gives you a parameter for what you're doing. And then you can branch off from that.
Right. It helps my brain too. I've discovered as I'm getting older, I'm pretty sure I have ADHD. And so what I've learned is I cannot have an open-ended task. I just can't. So how could I possibly expect these kids, especially kids who've never done it before? When I was working with NJPAC, we worked in a lot of inner city schools and all around Newark. And the majority of those kids had never stepped foot in a theater. Never mind done it. They didn't even know what it was. It was like a medium that had no concept of. So how can I expect them to just, hey, get on stage and just be this thing and face the audience? Like
that's what technique is, even for adult professional. We rely on our technique.
So you pull it away till you get to the core of it. I feel like that's what I learned in my time in New Jersey was like, oh, I'm okay. Let me say less. Oh, let me say less, and just peeling back until it was the core of, can you just show me happy? And why are you happy? And then it became relating it. Oh, you got a new puppy for your birthday. Boom, here we are. Now we're in the scene. It just started to become like, oh, so it's informed my life in that way as a teaching artist, but also as an actor. Like when people talk about intentions, even in acting school, I don't know that I fully understood what they were explaining to me. I feel like the concept didn't quite get there. And then as a teacher, I'm like, oh, I think I also I was a generation that did a lot of sense memory work, which was all about relating it to your past experiences. And it bring up a lot of trauma for people, and it was not healthy. And so it became very confusing. And so now I've learned, because I have to teach it to kids, and obviously I don't want them to be traumatized. I try to relate it to something that's light and fun and that they can understand, but that still gets us where we need to go. And so I can do that for myself. But yeah, I think I cannot just say, okay, I'm going to, like, I had to block this scene yesterday. I can't just be like, I'm going to block this scene, because I can't do that. I have to say, okay, let's look at the first page, or let's look at, maybe I'll say, okay, what's the set? What's the set? Let's start with that. Where are the benches? Okay. Okay, great.
All right.
Next, who's on stage left? And then I build from there. And that is directly related to how you would work with kids and teaching, because they called it scaffolding. You start the base and then you add, and you add, and you add to have a whole building. You can't just
pedagogy.
Yes. I've been doing this. I have no idea. That word is thrown around. I'm always like, yeah, okay. Like, I think I know what it means, but I don't.
You definitely do. You're using too many buzzwords. Don't even play. You know you do.
I never use it. I've never described what I do in that way. I don't.
Now you have to. Now you have to.
I have to. So it just sounds so serious. I'm just not a serious person.
That's why you have to sing it like I just did, and then it's not.
Okay, I do that a lot.
Serious anymore.
I do that a lot with my kids and in rehearsal. And my students right now in rehearsal, like, they don't all know me, and some of them are looking at me like, "Is she insane?" Like, because I'll just start busting out into song and dance like in the middle of rehearsal, and then they're all like, "Are you okay?"
It's theater. Come on.
But I do that. That was another thing I learned at NJPAC. I do that because they said, model what it looks like you want them to do.
Bingo.
So if you want them to be silly and ridiculous and make things a little awkward and uncomfortable, you got to model what that looks like. If you want them to be safe and feel comfortable making mistakes and messing up, you got to show them what that looks like too. I mess up. I don't hide it. I used to, and stress and sweat. Now I'm like, whoops. And then it's like we all laugh, and then we move on.
No, you're totally right, though. You're modeling what it is to be an artist also.
Oh,
I mean, that is. It's like, to be an artist is to try and fail and experiment and look at it again and throw it away and
butt heads.
Hi, everybody. Just a quick break in the conversation to let everybody know that we are working on season 2 of the Creative Life podcast. So if you are a creative, or if you know a creative that would be interested, that would like to be interviewed on the podcast, this could be creatives by any definition, people that are creatives in their professional life or creatives in their home life or in any way. We would love to talk to you and hear your story. So visit arts-collab.com/creative life pod and send us a note if you'd like to be interviewed. All right, everybody, back to Adrienne. Well, sorry, hold on. We skipped a big thing here. So you were living in New Jersey, but now you don't live in New Jersey anymore. Where are you now, and what are you doing now?
So because it feels so right to me now when I look back at the sort of controlled chaos I like to call of my life. I was working 4 different teaching artist jobs. I was fully using my degree. I kept saying, "Mom, look at me, Mom," very exciting. No more bartending, no more side survival gigs. I was having a career for the first time in my life. Everything I did was related to my craft.
Awesome.
And my artistry. And it was incredible. The first thing that happened that kind of threw a wrench in things was I got pregnant with twins. So, that was number 1. That was a huge setback. I had to sort of like put everything on hold. Number 2, I got a condition called Bell's palsy, which affects the left side of my face. I got it 3 days before I gave birth to my twins, which is very common in pregnancy, which I didn't know, but people should know. And I sit around for 1.5 years with Bell's palsy, and I lose the use of the left side of my face. I couldn't see for like 3 months out of my left eye. I couldn't drive. I couldn't act. I couldn't do anything. And at the time I was studying voiceover, I had to put all that on hold. I invested tons of money. It was a mess. Anyway, I digress. I'm going off on a tangent. But it kind of like fueled this major shift as well. I'm definitely not performing anymore. I'm just going to focus on teaching. And the silver lining is that's what I wound up doing. And it was amazing. And so I had 4 jobs when COVID hit. They were all teaching related jobs. So COVID happened. I lost all my work. We had a moment of, oh my gosh, without me working, how are we going to afford to live here in New Jersey? Because unfortunately, it's very expensive to live there. So we just had a moment of like, okay, what are our savings? How long is this going to work? And we're like, in a year, maybe. And COVID, we had no idea how long it was going to last. So we kind of panicked a little. My husband asked his job, hey, I'm from Colorado. I'm thinking about moving home. What do you think about me working remotely? They came back within a few days and said, sure, go for it. We kind of assessed the market, and the market at the time, particularly where we were, was bananas. People, because we were commuter town from New York City.
Everybody was leaving the city.
Yep,
Everybody had to get out. Yeah.
mass exodus. So we put our house on the market, and it was COVID. So it was like, you had to make appointments. We had over 30 appointments in 3 days and 10 offers. And 65,000 over asking was what we accepted. Was insane, complete insanity. So we took the money and quite literally ran. I mean, that's what we did. We just did it. I mean, it was probably, looking back, one of the most traumatic things I've ever experienced, honestly, because
the speed of it all. You mean just like
of it, and like I lived around in and around New York City my entire life. At this point, I'm 40 something. I didn't know who I was. I lost my identity. And I didn't know what I was going to do for work. And we got in our minivan and we're like, bye. And I was just like, what is happening? I think I wasn't really fully there mentally. But the silver lining is a huge silver lining. Number one, we paid off all of our debt. Credit card debt.
Amazing.
Car loan, student loan. I mean, and then when we got here, Phil's from here. His parents live here. His 2 aunts live here. A bunch of his cousins live here. Some of his cousins who were living in New York, who he had moved to New York with originally, moved back here. So we just had this whole, new group family, like this whole thing, and we bought a house before the market exploded here. So we sold high and we bought low. I mean, whoever gets to tell that story. So my life as an artist and a teacher and an actor and all of that was on hold. And we just got here and we did all of that. And about a year after I moved here, I said, I'm going to be an actor again. Like, I just decided it was a fresh start. Like, I'm not doing Broadway. That dream is gone. And I don't want to say it's gone, because now I'm like, you never know. But at the time it was like, I'm in Colorado. What am I going to do here? What have I got to lose? That pressure was gone.
Yeah.
And so I walked into my very first audition. I never experienced anything like that before. I was not nervous. Like, okay, I shouldn't say I was not nervous at all. But when I was in the room, I was just like, sort of matter of fact about it. And I realized that's probably what I should have been doing all along. But I think the pressure of New York and the competition and oh my gosh, and the dream, just, I don't know.
Do you think that's also a little bit of just age and experience of just like, you have a whole other life?
Right. Through it all. I'd had 3 kids, twins, Bell's palsy, moved across country, COVID, lost all my work. Okay, I'm going to sing this song. Don't hire me or whatever, Who cares? And of course I booked it because, I mean, I don't know if that's advice, but I tend to book the things that I'm sort of, this is like the worst advice. Don't take this advice, but I tend to book things that I'm kind of like, about, because then I don't bring that nervous desperation into the room, which they can smell. And then I made connections. I started working at a theater, but eventually I've been just meeting a lot of people. I signed up to be a judge for this Colorado Theater Guild for their Henry Awards. And that's helped me to see what all the theaters are in Colorado and networking and meet people, and also get more educated, because I feel like there was this gap of me as a performer. So I'm like, what are the musicals people are doing? Like, I don't know. And just, I got to a point where I stopped seeing shows in New York, having kids and the expense of it, even when, living in New Jersey. I wasn't staying on top of my craft in that way. So I'm diving in head first here but in a different way, because it's not my first priority. I'm a mom first. Like, I have to be. So there's something more relaxed about it. There isn't that pressure, and I do what I want. I I do the work I want to do. You know, I don't have to do it. And that's something that I remind myself a lot when I get stressed out. Like I got an agent this year. Sorry, this year. I booked my first voiceover gig a couple weeks ago. That was super exciting. I did some voiceover in New York, but I hadn't done like anything here and it had been a long time. And I got this point where I was getting a bunch of like, you know, auditions all at once. And I had a moment of like, wait, I don't have to do that. You know?
Yeah.
Like in New York, I was like, I gotta go to it. Because if I don't go to that, what am I doing? But here, because I have a life and I teach, I'm working with this theater arts program here. I've been there for over a year now. I'm directing a show with them. I'm like, I got a gig. I'm good.
Yeah.
You know?
You're really being able to like choosing to pursue the projects that you're really excited about.
Yes. Instead of playing the numbers game or this pressure, this stress of I got to be working, I got to be,
You have
which
to say yes to every opportunity,
right, which
too.
honestly didn't work. It didn't actually work for me.
And I think it's a creative energy suck as well, because then you're always having to, if you're never doing something that really feeds you,
right.
you never get that back, you know, and then it does go away really quickly.
Yes, it is a two-way street in that sense. I think it's important to stress that when you are first starting out, though, it is important to say yes as much as you can without overdoing it, because that is a way to network and work begets work. I always say that. But at some point, you can start getting pickier and pickier, and it has to feed your soul, because it is, at the end of the day, it's art. And if it doesn't bring you some kind of joy, some kind of meaning, some kind of purpose, I don't know why we're doing it. It can't just be just the money. I mean, especially as an artist, because like, who is making their life's
Spoiler
work?
to the listener. Spoiler to the listener. There's no money in it. Sorry to
That's
tell
nobody.
you. If you were waiting for that to be the end of the conversation, listener, I'm sorry to tell you, there's no money
Sorry
in
to
it.
tell you, there has to be a buy-in more than that, because first of all, the money's not enough. And second of all, your time is so valuable. And as artists, and especially for me, who dives into something so full-bodied, full-throttled, I have to sit there and go, is this really what I want to do? Because I'm not going to do anything half. I don't know
No,
how to do that.
that's
And
not
most artists I've met don't know how to do that. They're in or they're out. And so I've been really, really like, you know what? Because I started to do that here. Oh, just going auditions to meet the people. And I realized not only does that not serve me, but that doesn't serve them. Because if I'm not fully invested in what I'm auditioning for, like I'm wasting their time, because I'm
Yeah.
not, you know, there's
Yeah.
this mentality of, oh, get in front of people. I was just talking to a friend of mine who's an actor in LA about that. I want to get in front of this casting director. And I said, but if you're getting in front of them for something you're not actually right for, like fully right for, or that you fully want to do, are you actually making a good impression? And you can't make a first impression.
Right.
So be thoughtful about that. And there's other ways to meet people. And that's why I do the networking. And I see as much theater as I can. And I do as much, I stage managed a show just to meet people. It was a show I auditioned for. And I got called back. I didn't get it. And I emailed the director on the advice of a acting like career coach I was working with at the time. Highly recommend that. Even though I do that for people, sometimes it's hard to do it for yourself. She was like, do the stage managing job. Go see a show, stand in the lobby, meet people after. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. No one does that in New York. You can't touch those people. They're above you. But here, it's not like that. They all come out, sit at the bar, they have a drink, they chat. Then your Facebook friends. The next thing you know, you go to an audition and they're like, hey, that's exactly what happened. So I emailed the director and I said, hey, thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed this process. I'd love to work with you in another way. And she emailed me back and said, we need a stage manager for the show that I didn't get cast in. Like in my old days in New York, I would have been like, no way. Because I would have been so offended. But in my new brain, I went, yes, because I knew it was a way in. It was a way, and it showed you're a team player. It showed that you want to just be there. You want to be involved. And it was a show I was invested in. Yeah. It was a particular show I really, really, really was interested in and wanted to work on. So that was the buy-in. And I met several actors who I'm still friends with now. That was a year and a half ago. One of them introduced me to a director who ended up casting me in a production of Fun Home here. I played Helen, the mom, at the same theater I did Cinderella. He took me to a show she was seeing, and we chatted. And then when I went to the audition, she was like, "Oh, hi!" And it was just like boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this isn't just happening. I am actively creating these situations for myself, these opportunities for myself." In New York, it was like, "Oh, it just happens. It's just luck. You never know." It's
Mm,
baloney. It's
that's baloney.
baloney.
Yeah.
You have to create your opportunity. You have to be involved. You have to be steering that ship. There is a networking hat. There's a business to it. It's scary. It's probably scarier than any performing I've ever done, but the benefits of it are unbelievable. Like I can go on for a whole nother hour about it.
I think this is how every field works, honestly. I mean,
Yeah,
that's how
it
everything
is.
works.
It is.
And it's just, and it's something, if we all just realized that when we were younger,
Oh,
I didn't have that confidence now. And now it's like, oh, like it's a bit of a, well, who cares kind of attitude. It's different. You get a
yeah,
lot
when
further.
you feel like it's this door and you just keep knocking on it, and well, one day someone will open. No, there's other
Just open the
doors,
door. Just
or go
open the
around the back, go in the window,
door around the back.
call them, call them. What are you waiting at the door for?
Just, all right. So now you're back in it. You're back in
Well,
that life, and you're feeling, is it as fun, inspiring, creative, joyful as it always was?
it's more. Honestly, it's more. I cannot even believe I'm saying that. First of all, that I live in Colorado and I'm having a more fulfilling artistic experience and career here than I ever did when I lived in New York. I mean, just saying that sentence out loud blows my mind. I have
Mm-hmm.
an agent. I never had an agent in New York. I'm getting a lot of auditions. I booked the one voiceover gig. I've done some extra background work here. I've done 2 musicals, and I'm directing this show, and I've stage managed a show. I'm doing enough. Like,
You haven't been back at it that long to be doing all. I
no,
mean,
yeah, it's been 3 years. 3 years. Oh gosh, wow. It's only been 3 years. I've accomplished more in that 3 years than I think I did my entire time in New York, which is well over 20 years. Like, I don't have as much to show for myself, I feel like. And not even just that I don't have as much to show as in credits, but things that like I really was enjoying doing.
yeah,
It really, felt like real work, felt like real art, felt like real career driven projects. It was a
yeah,
lot of like, okay, I did that. I'm getting through this. I'm doing it. But now I'm like, when I go to an audition now, I'm so picky. I research the show. I try to go see it. I try to watch it. There's a lot of YouTube videos of, sometimes there'll be high schools doing it. There's all types of YouTube videos of these shows you can watch. Listen to the soundtrack, read the Wikipedia summary. I really dive deep into the research. I didn't do that. I didn't have time for that in New York. I would go on like 10 auditions a week. I don't have time to research shows like that. And where did that get me? So now I go one audition, okay. And the 2 weeks before I start diving into the research, I get really excited about it. I get really into the world of it, the same way I expect my students to when they come to rehearsal. Let's be in this world and swim in it together. And then I get into that audition and I'm having the best fun. Like, I had an amazing audition the other day. I won't say who it was for, but it was a pretty big prominent theater here in Colorado. I've auditioned for them a few times. I've been called back once. I went in and I was just like, I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to do this audition. I was like, ooh, it's going to be fun. Like, I just was like excited. I can't remember being like that in New York. I was just like, come on, let's get through this. Let's do it. Let's do it. And so I went in and I was like, and I was myself, and I'm not afraid to be like, hi, good to see you again. And they remembered me. And I asked them, I was singing "Wouldn't It Be Loverly" from My Fair Lady, and I said, would you like it in the Cockney that it's usually sung in, or would you like it in a standard British? Because in the show, there might be both, and I didn't know what they preferred. I would have never done that in New York in a million years. I would have been so afraid. Like, if I spoke, what would happen? You know?
yeah. Being yourself. Imagine that. Yeah,
Imagine that, which is what they're always telling you to do. But that, I don't want to know what this fear was. And they were like, try it in the proper. Okay. I do it in the proper. She's like, oh, that was great. Actually, could you do it in the Cockney now? We're doing the Cockney. Oh, that was wonderful. And I was like, I walked out of there on cloud nine. Because first of all, getting a redirect in an audition is the greatest thing ever, but used to scare me when it happened before.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh no.
That they like you, really.
It means they like you. And
Yeah.
it wasn't just because I did a good performance. And I understand that now. It's because I walked in and I was so excited to be there. And I knew the show inside and out. And I could have said, well, this character does this and this character, what would, like that. And they could see that I knew. And it was like, yeah, man, you're showing up. You're showing up 100%. I think that's why when I showed up to those auditions in New York, even when I got called back, I couldn't possibly have been doing my best work because I didn't really understand the world of the piece.
Mm-hmm.
It was rare that I think I fully was immersed in that world and I could really show off. And so I definitely have shed that and I've learned that. And honestly, leaving New York was the best thing I've done for my career because I'm working more than ever. I'm working on projects that I want to work on. I'm enjoying it. It's so much healthier. It's so much healthier. So yeah, come to Colorado. It's great here. We love it here. We love it.
Thank you, Adrienne.
Oh,
Thank you for the chat.
oh, you're welcome. This is awesome.
Adrienne, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And if you'd like to know more about what Adrienne is up to, you can visit her website, adrienneasterita.com. I'll put that in the show notes. Or you can visit ours, arts-collab.com/Creative Life Pod. Thanks for listening. And until next time, keep making stuff. Bye.